All right, hello everyone. Welcome again to the Traffic Corner. We're going to get started here. I am Bryant Ficek.
And Mike Spack here.
And let's go ahead and get into this one. All right, so first up, brought to you by Spack Enterprise. Most people, I think, know us. We've got a lot of different arms going on here. Mike on traffic is obviously our big one, but we kind of like to branch out into these things and just talk about different projects, different scenarios, and let people know what we got going on.
So there are very beautiful faces. And so some of you I see have been with us for the first couple of webinars. Thanks for coming back. We appreciate it. We did have a kind of a tweak. One of our email blasts went out. The original plan was today we were going to talk about access and circulation, but we sent out an email blast saying we're going to do this removing the left turn lane and talk about bike lanes. So instead of trying to have all kinds of corrections, we're just going to roll with it. If you don't want to hear anything about left turn lanes or bike lanes, feel free to dive off now and come back next week for the access and circulation. And with that, I see Ian's on the line. He had a couple comments, and we had a little discussion going at the end of last week's webinar. But feel free to use the chat function. I have hopefully muted everyone based on past feedback, but feel free to use the chat to send in comments or questions, and we'll try to keep an eye on that as we're rolling through our topic here.
All right.
So next up, today's case study is in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, a suburb where our office is actually located right outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we do a lot of these types of projects for them. To their credit, in my mind, the city's really taken a hard view with their transportation planning process, going back about 10 years now, of reviewing their infrastructure. And the vision for the city has been changing over time, that they're becoming much more multimodal and really thinking about bicycle lanes and pedestrian connections and making sidewalk and trail connections to transit. There's a light rail line proposed that is probably coming through town in a couple of years. That's been very controversial, but it is on track. But the city is trying to balance this infrastructure and multimodal, and do we have extra pavement out there that we could use for something else? So today's question, Deb Heiser, the city engineer, and came to us and asked us to look at Louisiana Avenue, 28th Street. Louisiana is a city street, but it is a minor arterial. It's just a 2-lane road, turn lanes at major intersections, but carrying 17,000 vehicles a day, so it is bumping up against the capacity, kind of planning capacity limits. 28th Street is a neighborhood collector with about 3,000 vehicles a day, and it also has a traffic signal at the intersection, a little signal. So when we zoom in here, westbound there's no left turn lane, but eastbound there is a eastbound to northbound left turn lane at the intersection, and the city is looking at making 28th Street as a bike corridor, a bicycling corridor. It fits between two east-west minor arterials and is one of the longer corridors in the city. So they asked us, hey, what do you think? Can we get rid of this left turn lane, and can we squeeze in bike lanes? So first question was, okay, not that we're getting into final design and not that we're getting through all of the options, but okay, what would it look like? A little hand sketch here, not even getting into CAD, just spending 15 minutes on each of these concepts, which Bryant and I are both a little old-fashioned, and one of our mentors was very old-fashioned, and made sure, hey, just get some pen and paper, and you get some tracing paper and start thinking about, hey, is this going to work? So I just laid out option one, 10 to 11 foot lanes each direction, 5-foot bike lane, and then squeeze in a 7-foot parking lane.
So this was, yeah, just a very basic, is it even feasible to make this work? So not even looking at operations yet, like Mike said, just taking some pen and paper, laying it out. So this is one option we had to fit everything in. One thing I'd like to point out, we do have 10.5-foot drive lanes, which is starting to get pretty narrow when you look in there. But we felt justified in doing this because this is a local road. There's no transit along this way, so no big buses, no big trucks for the most part. So again, we felt comfortable going down to that width because it is just passenger cars for the most part, and they can easily fit within there.
Right. Yeah. Obviously, this would not be appropriate in an industrial park or on more of an arterial that would have regular bus service. Of course, there will be school buses and garbage trucks and things, yeah. But we're comfortable. We like to. We're okay going less than 12 feet on lane widths in this kind of scenario.
So option two, we looked at a bike lane on each side. You got some variable widths here depending on how wide you want the bike lanes or how wide you want that drive lane, but generally that 10.5 to 11-foot drive, we get the 5.5, 6-foot bike lane, and this is how we could fit it on bike lane on each side. So again, just looking at does it work, took us, like I said, 5-10 minutes to draw this out, put the dimensions in, and yeah, this would be a feasible option.
And then kind of to riff on that option too, as we're going through a larger intersection, would we want to put some pylons out there to make them segregated bike lanes, more protected? Pylons are popular in Minneapolis along the bike lanes. At the Midwestern and / Great Lakes District meeting this summer I was at, I sat in on a bike lane topic the city of Chicago was going through, that they've ended up removing most of their pylons along bike lanes, and they got video and they studied the operations. They didn't see much difference taking the pylons out, but their snow plowing operations around those pylons, they were much more interested in making sure the bike lanes were clear of snow than having the segregated pylons out there. So that's city by city. Obviously not a concern if you're down in Florida, but up here in the Midwest with snow season coming around the corner for us in a couple of weeks probably.
It's definitely a concern.
So a quick, spend a half an hour, sketch out some options. Yeah, looks feasible. Take out a left turn lane. We got some extra pavement there. We can look through some different options with parking. And so, yeah, it seems like a feasible option. Kind of met our first screen test. So next was to get into Vistro and to do some modeling per the highway capacity manual. We put in the existing timing with the existing turning movement volumes we collected, and found the intersection was operating at level service D. And
that does include pedestrian and bikes going through, and then as we looked to it, we figured there's probably going to be some more bikes going through the intersection as well, so we did jump that up a little bit just to add that element to the analysis as well.
Mm-hmm. And this is actually the second table out of our report. The first one was just existing data with existing timing. But then okay, what if we optimized it? Well, we made some improvements, but the level of service grades didn't change. It was still D overall with the east-west movement operating at level of service F because it is a longer cycle length out there. I think we're in the couple-minute range on the cycle length with the 17,000 north-south vehicles on Louisiana Avenue. Most of the green time is dedicated to Louisiana Avenue, so just by default, you end up during the peak hour in kind of that level service D range. Then we did some optimizing and, again, made some improvements with certain movement delays and overall, but didn't change the level of service gradation.
The big thing here, though, is as you look at this as a first screening, there's no change in level of service. So we took that left turn lane out. We did a little timing adjustment. We were able to keep those level of service grades roughly the same. So again, as you look at this, we did our sketches. It seemed feasible. We look at level of service now. Level of service wise, it seems roughly feasible. You keep everything the same.
So next step, we always like to look at multiple metrics, the measures of effectiveness, and we're always interested in just at least looking at the queuing that we're getting out of the reports. And here, without the left turn lane, you do see a big change. That squeezing in the left turn lane next to the through right lane, you're getting the 95th percentile queues at 270, 290 feet. The 50th percentile in parentheses, okay, 170, 180 feet. The through right lane, that was not as heavy of a movement, so that was able to move through quicker and didn't see as much queuing, as much stacking up. But when we're forcing the right turns to mix with the left turns, as all of us traffic engineers intuitively would know, our queue is going to jump. But we had a big jump here. The 50th percentile queue went up 3x, 2 to 3x, which in this specific scenario, when we actually look at the corridor, we only have 260 feet on the short block here before we get into the adjacent intersection. So this 50th percentile queue of 316 feet, stacking up, waiting to turn left or go through or go right, is stacking up for the majority of the peak hour and jamming up the adjacent intersection. And this, we are very open to repurposing extra space and pushing the boundaries, but this kind of, we're still traffic engineers, we still have a responsibility to the public. We thought jamming things up for the majority of the peak hour and even more of the peak hour, this was a big enough flag for us.
Yeah, so this becomes a balance of what we're trying to do, what are the safety implications of having that extra one, of that longer queue and implications at that other intersection. So as you can see from our conclusion here, we concluded that we didn't need it, or rather we would be against it at this point given the information we reviewed. Those queues were just too long. The safety impacts on that other intersection we felt were great enough not to immediately proceed and go with this option.
So I do see the comment, I didn't see when it popped up, just asking, did we use other software programs, or did we look at multiple scenarios? And we just used Bistro with the level of service reports and delay, but we did go ahead and run the two scenarios. So we ran the scenario, how does it exist today? How would it exist if we threw on more bicycles? And then how would it exist with more bicycles without the left turn lane? The level of service was all similar, the delay numbers, but the queuing was much different.
Yeah, the options were really the optimizing the timing and then just with and without the turn lane. So those were the couple options that we looked at there.
Okay, and I see Devin would like to hop on the conversation, and I'm going to do that in just a moment, but I want to jump to where we're at right now. So initially we said, hey, we flagged this, we think this is a problem, but St. Louis Park, we have a great relationship with them, and they're experimenters like we are, that they will put out cones and barrels and test out different layouts. They'll put temporary traffic circles in a neighborhood if they're experiencing construction impacts, but they don't want to do anything permanent. So they're very much on board with, hey, let's try things out very temporarily and get some measurements and see if our models are really representing what is going to happen. So that really, in just laying out our analysis and giving them a memo with all of these details, and having a follow-up conversation with staff. Where we're at right now is they're pondering the idea that, okay, the models are showing there likely could be a problem, but let's tweak the signal timing, let's put some pylons out there, and let's get some video cameras set up for a week, and let's scroll through those videos and see, okay, how often did that 95th, 50th percentile queue back up and jam up the other intersection. So we're pretty sure they're going to run this experiment later this fall and get a bunch of video and see, is it actually a problem? Because when we're modeling and it's right on the edge of, is something going to be a problem or not, we all know our models can be very sensitive, that they work, and all of a sudden they don't fail, or they fail. And we may be in one of those scenarios where the model is showing it worse than what reality will actually be.
And I still think there will be longer queues there, but what I'm most curious to see is the average is what we really flagged, but is there a chance that it's not 50% of the time? Is it really only 5-10 minutes of that peak hour and it doesn't occur any other time during the day? Because now you're starting to change what we look at, change that equation in terms of the benefit for an all-day bike lane versus an impact over a short time. They start to weigh each other out a little bit more. So, yeah, we're a little wary of it given the results, but without doing any permanent changes, we think it's probably a worthy experiment just to find out that answer for sure.
Okay. So I believe I've unmuted everyone. Devin, did you want to jump in here? And I am not hearing Devin. Let's see. I am not sure if I'm the right guy to be driving here. So Devin, I think I have a problem here. Oh, okay. Never mind. Devin doesn't want to be the presenter. So with that, that's kind of the analysis we've run through of how we look at these kinds of little issues that pop up when we're working with the community. They bring us an idea. First, we'll go through the process of, hey, is the idea feasible? Do we see any big problems right off the bat? Do a little proof of concept. Then figure out what analysis we should run. And then if it is in the realm of possibility, and we are in the realm of possibility, the level of service did not change by taking the left turn lane out. It's just the queuing is our concern. Let's talk about running an experiment. So with that, again, it seems like maybe we should start advertising these as about 20-minute webinars that were done a little bit early. But are there any questions out there? Any comments, thoughts?
While we're waiting for that, I'll just throw something out too. Obviously, over the last few years, we're starting to get into more multimodal analysis. So situations like this are coming up more and more, at least definitely from our standpoint and some of the projects that we get to. And so what we're really looking at is that balance between bikes, peds, and vehicles and all that. And we're starting to get to questions of, is it okay to degrade vehicle operations in order to improve bikes or transit or peds, whatever it might be? So those are some interesting questions, because is it okay to, if you're at level of service C, is it okay to take it down to a level of service D if you can get more out of it? So those are definitely interesting questions, and on the surface, I'm in favor of it. I like to see more multimodal. I use multimodal aspects, so I don't think it's a problem in some cases to take those operations down in order to find that balance for all users.
Okay. So Joe Gustafson has a question for us here, at least a thought, and it's a good one, that if you take out the left turn lane, and especially with this being a neighborhood road and people used to having the left turn lane there, so kind of almost operating as a bypass lane on the right. You take away the left turn lane, are people just going to veer into the bike lane and potentially present a safety problem with people cutting into a bike lane? And right now that east-west phase is just permitted, no left turn phasing. Joe's saying you could go to split phasing to try to flush that left turn faster. With that, with the overall intersection being at D and with the main line being such heavy traffic, I think going to split phase would end up pushing us into level service E. So I don't know that I would jump there, but what the underlying Joe's thought may be justification for putting those pylons in so that it really is tightened up physically and they just can't go around, would be my first reaction to that.
Another thing we thought of too is if we could put in just a lead phase for that eastbound direction. So if there are a few lefts that are out in front, they could get through. You could get some of that through before the westbound direction goes. So those are some options that we can play with the signal timing to try to make it better.
Okay. Another comment, how do we consider safety in decision making apart from level of service indicator? One thing out there that isn't used very much, and we don't use it very much, is, I mean, there is a whole safety analysis manual now with different tables on crash reductions, but we don't use it very much. In this kind of scenario, that's a tough one. Do you have thoughts on that, Bryant?
It ends up being a case-by-case basis, and this is where you try to think of all those different aspects of what's going back, how does it impact the adjacent ones? Like Joe brought up, the weaving traffic, that's definitely a potential concern for sure. So it's really just, I don't have any metrics for it or anything like that, but it's really just trying to think your way through that, and then how much of an impact is that? So that's where we talked a little bit about that impact on the adjacent intersection. Is that the full hour? Is that a piece of the hour? Those are two vastly different things that you can look at. That weaving, with that potential weaving issue, can we put the pylons up to get rid of that?
Right.
So yeah, there's no real concrete numbers we can put with that, I don't think. It's just kind of a case by case, trying to think your way through it.
Yeah, and dynamic ENG, the dynamic engineer also brings up that if we really are backing up to the adjacent intersection to the west, and we just have paint out here, people are going to likely stack up side by side, even if there's a bike lane painted there, to get back to the previous way it operated. Again, probably leading us to needing pylons out there in this scenario to really handle that. I'm going to unmute everyone. I had another person, let's see, Brandon had a comment. So go ahead, Brandon. Or do you not have some? Okay, I guess for next meeting I'm going to have to figure out how to make people a presenter, because I'm not seeing it and it's not intuitive. So sorry about that, but if there are more comments, certainly type them in the chat. Let's see, is it acceptable from the public agency, the F level service for the secondary movement? Yes, in our marketplace in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, most cities don't have a policy that defines what acceptable level of service is, but the industry here says overall intersection level of service D is acceptable. And by definition, if you get back into the highway capacity manual, you're almost always going to have level of service E and F on certain movements when you are in an overall intersection level of service D at a signal. So individual movements being at F is considered okay, but then whenever we get as our philosophy on level service F for certain movements, that certainly triggers us wanting to look at the queuing. A level service F with the 95th percentile queue of 1 or 2 vehicles is much different than a level service F with 20 or 30 vehicles queued up in that 95th or even 50th percentile queue. So this is where we dig into the numbers even more when we get into a level service F on a specific movement. Okay, Brandon, did you have a thought that you wanted to jump in here with the chat? Otherwise, I'm not seeing any other comments. And from there, I think we'll give it a minute. But thanks, everyone. This was a lively conversation today. And we're actually considering, based on the quietness of the first couple of webinars, of doing it more as a recording. But we are liking this interaction. So thank you, everyone. You kind of reinforced the idea of doing a live webinar.
We'll try to learn the technology a little bit better, so maybe we can give the presentation to other people and let it open up a little bit more too. So stick with us. We'll keep making this better.
Awesome. Thanks for joining our experiment, and we'll see you next week.